Allison. We got Peggy.
We've got me.
And me.
No.
No. All right.
Let's see.
Good morning, good morning, good morning.
It takes a while for our stuff to like load up and let us know that it's live, so we just like talk until
Yeah.
it happens.
Just filling in the space. We've had some activity on the Goodreads.
Oh yeah.
So remember to check out the Goodreads if you haven't yet. It's a fun place to continue the conversation.
Oh, cool.
Whoa, Shelby's in Normandy.
Yeah.
Wow.
While we're talking about folks, Shelby sent us a gift, and we have just recently posted it on the YouTube. So there's a comment on there with something she sent us that's really cool.
So cool. What a great way to commemorate a very funny moment from a book we really didn't love.
Welcome to books we wish we never read.
Yeah, but that was a great moment. It was very funny. Wham bam.
Yeah.
Wham bang.
Yeah. Anyway, you want to go ahead and get started?
Yeah, let's get started.
Do it.
Welcome to Books We Never Read.
Except for those we have.
I'm Nicole.
And I'm Jason.
And this is episode 41 where we're talking about book 2 of Dune. So this is still in the first book of Dune, but Dune itself is separated into 3 little books. So that's where we are. So before we get started, please make sure if you're joining us in the replay or live that this is actually what you want to be watching, because we talk about what we've read as if you've already read it. So spoilers abound. Please also like and subscribe and add comments. If you're on the replay, we encourage you to say whatever you would like to say if you were with us in the live, but say it in the comments. You can also join us off YouTube and Goodreads at Books We Never Read. Share, let us know any books that you want us to read in the future. And, we're just so happy to have you all here. It still is just my favorite thing that we get to keep reliving the books that we've read through new viewers and new ideas and new comments. It's so great. Everyone takes their own experiences into the reading and pulls their own meaning out of the reading, and so you just never stop learning.
Yeah. We've had a lot of new interactions this week, probably because we're reading Dune and people are putting Dune into YouTube. Probably through no good work of our own. But it's been really cool to have new people join in and talk to us about this book and then sometimes about other things. So that's cool.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm really enjoying Dune so far. It's a pretty fun read.
I didn't expect to like it this much. I'll be honest. It's good.
So what has you liking it?
All right, let's go right in, right? This week we basically spent... I was in my notes that I had written down while I was listening to it at work, I wrote, because the name of the book is Muad'dib, right? That's the name of this one. Or Conversations in the Desert. Oh. Because that's what this book is, right? There's the fight. There's Conversations in the Desert, there's the fight in the desert, and then there's the fight in the gladiator pit, right? And those are the only things that are not conversations in the desert. But we got to spend so much time with the Fremen and learn about their culture and everything, and that was just really cool, because that's what I like most about sci-fi and fantasy, is just learning about other possible worlds and ways of being, and there was just a lot of cool imaginings of the way that things could be. Right? So for example, yesterday I was cutting the grass and I was listening to the part where, and I have another conversation I have about this part later, but Jameis's wife just being well, I'll mourn him later, when it's time, and that's really interesting to me, because in my mind, there's just one way to mourn somebody, right? You find out they're dead and you just go, right? Here we go. And that's not how they do it. And then it made me think, what other ways could there possibly be, right? There are people who mourn for 30 days and then it's done. And, are they done? Is the way that we do it, the way people, really do it, and then everything else is just, a construct to try to control that? Probably not, right? Probably not. You just mourn in the way that you mourn, and then it's done. And how healthy is that? It seems to me to be actually really healthy to be this is how you do it, and then you're done. Instead of just being I don't know, man, you'll figure it out. because then you may never, right?
Yeah, but then, when you have that, so okay, it's like a two-edged sword kind of. You have a system for mourning, and that's great because it means it opens up that window. You're behaving in a normal way, right? And so it makes it easier. But then, because like grief is not a standard thing and we don't all process it the same way, so that having that window open is helpful for probably most people.
Yeah.
But then if you're like just mourning differently, then you're just like, I don't fit.
Yeah.
And then then you're mourning because you're out of place, and
Yeah, maybe.
And you can't mourn.
It's just interesting.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what the right answer is. So.
Yeah. But it is interesting how different cultures in general handle mourning.
Yeah. And just the entire focus on water, right? If you're a fantasy reader and you've read The Wheel of Time, right? There's a group of people called the Aiel who come from from a desert basically, and everything they do is about water, including their jokes. Like, they don't think something's funny unless you're talking about water. Like, Rand, the main character, will make a joke and they'll be like, I don't understand, there's no water in this joke, so how can it be funny, right? But it's like, but that's like an interesting cultural thing, right? Like, that is the only thing that could possibly be funny.
Wow.
Peggy says she is not enjoying the book.
Oh goodness.
Well, these things come along, man.
Sorry, Peggy. Oh man, I've lost my chat.
Yeah, so Peggy says we think we have a way to mourn, but we don't. After 7 days, we don't just stop hurting. Some people mourn for years or a lifetime, and that's true, right? That's true.
Yeah.
But having I guess what was cool about their way is like there was like a the whole like coming up and being a friend of Jameis and everything. Like I thought that was really neat, and it was a little more. I don't know. I definitely believe that ritual is very important, right?
Right.
And I've said that on this show many, many times. And so I like collecting rituals from all the books that we read, and that was one of them.
Well, and I wonder if the wife isn't mourning yet because like they've got some stuff to do. They have to get out of there.
Yeah, sure.
They're packing up.
Yeah.
So when is the appropriate time for her to mourn?
I don't know.
Yeah.
And it doesn't really matter, right? My point was just that it got me thinking about something.
Yeah.
Right? I don't have the answers, but it is interesting to imagine other cultures, right?
Yeah.
And it kind of made me think back to Children of Time, right? And like, well, how would the spiders do this, right? How do spiders mourn? And what is their ritual for doing this? So
I miss Children of Time.
Yeah.
Let's see. Oh, it looks like Peggy's working on a comment. What I found interesting and cringy.
Yeah.
Tell us more.
So there is one thing that I actually found cringy, and it's related. I'm just gonna go ahead and hit that one since we're here. There was the only thing that I felt was out of place was Jameis's wife now belongs to Paul, and he can just do whatever he wants, right?
Yeah.
And I thought that was there we go. Peggy's cringy thing is the same thing as my cringy thing. It didn't fit with the rest of the book, right? Like you have these like strong female characters, and going back to our last episode, like I really think that there's a lot of interesting thought in this book about choice and about like what is destiny and how things work between those two things, and in a society where you're constantly fighting and all this stuff is going on, I think it is natural that women would be very independent, and they would just, because they have to be warriors, and like, why would you be a potential warrior but also just be like, I will do whatever you say now, right? That's just weird. And it's kind of a holdover from, there's sort of this like jihad theme, and at one point they mentioned specifically Sunniism at one point, and so I feel like this is just a holdover that the author puts in there because of like the history of Islam and its relation to what the Fremen are supposed to be, but it makes no sense, and it just kind of comes out of nowhere, and it really took me out of the book for a second to be like, no, they wouldn't.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, that was weird. That was very weird. Shoot, I had thought of something while you were saying that and I forgot. Oh well. So speaking of the Fremen, I think it's really interesting. So the way this book is set up, we learned about Paul and his family in book 1, and that was really the exposition to the book. But now we're like in a whole new exposition where we're learning about the Fremen.
Yeah.
I think it's super cool that we saw them from, the imperialistic point of view at the beginning of the book. They were, a wild people, numbers unknown, very magical, and they must be very rugged and very uncivilized and, and all this stuff. And now, we're actually living with the Fremen, surviving because of the Fremen, because they've taken in Jessica and Paul. And we're really getting to see how rich and united they are, how rich their culture is, how, the elements for survival are baked into, good behaviors for the tribe itself. And it's just really interesting to me. Like, I really, really enjoyed reading this section and learning all about this tribe of the Fremen.
There's kind of this idea that, like, we here on Earth started off as we were hunter-gatherers, and then we had herds of sheep, and then we planted things, and then created temples and governments and kings and all that stuff. And there was, like, this progression, right? And people think that all the time, and that seems to not be true. Like, obviously, we were hunter-gatherers first, but most, like, herding cultures are likely an adaptation to other sedentary cultures to get out of the way, right? So, like, the Assyrians are running around, they're chopping people's heads off. Well, we're not going to stay here anymore. We're just going to become herders, and we're going to move into the mountains, and that's where those, like, cultures come from. And it seems that the Fremen are probably the same way, right? Like, they think of them as these, like, rugged, desert people who are, like, hiding out in the desert or whatever, but they weren't hiding before you were here.
Yeah.
Because they didn't have to, right?
Yeah.
But I think that a lot of what we see in the Fremen culture is an adaptation to survival, not necessarily to the planet, but to the varying governors that have come through. To your point.
Yeah. I also was really excited to hear, the real plan of the Fremen, and that's in not their children's time nor their grandchildren's time, but eventually that planet will be completely habitable and healthy and harbor green life and water. And what an amazing and hopeful spirit of the people to work so hard for something that they know they'll never see.
Yeah.
That is an attribute that we no longer have.
Yeah, I don't think we could do that.
Yeah.
We just couldn't.
Well, I mean, there are issues currently that we're like, we're not going to have to deal with it in our lifetime, so who cares?
Yeah. Well, I would like to point out, too, that we only get that perspective from Stilgar Siege, right? Like, we don't see the other people who are probably trying to steal that water just to survive, right? Like, it's probably not as
widespread.
It's probably not as universal as he is leading us to think it is. And I'm sure there are several, like, major groups that are involved in this project, but there are probably also plenty of groups that are trying to steal it. Or I mean, there must be Fremen politics, right? There must be, and so their ability to achieve, I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know, but
so I wonder, are we going to see, the larger branch of Fremen across the planet? Are we, as we kind of zoom out and head towards what I assume is going to be this war, are we going to see more Fremen?
Yeah, I don't know. And remember that there's like 18 books and we're only reading one, so we probably don't see any of that stuff.
Get to Spark Notes.
Yeah. Let's jump back to the chat real quick.
Okay.
Peggy said this book bothers me because it seems like women can only be used for reproductive property or religious property, and there definitely is that. I mean, like, that's in there, and there's just so much other, like, cool stuff, and then you have that. And part of that is probably just a relic of the time that it was written, 30 or 40 years ago, whatever. But also, and I think specifically in this case, it is because of what he is trying to portray as a continuation from something that is currently alive and well on Earth, that then becomes this extraterrestrial, this humans on another planet thing.
Yeah.
But also, like, we get this again with the Baron's wife, where she's gonna sleep with Federaltha to make an heir. And I mean, like, that comes up again, and that was weird. I mean, like, she seems to be cool with it because she's a Bene Gesserit and they're mixing bloodlines or whatever. But, like, y'all can't, like, make a baby in a vat or something? Like, y'all can't y'all can't do that yet? Right. Come on.
Well, and we read literature to, like, escape from the cruddy realities of the world, and unfortunately that's just one that we can't escape. Who's responsible for reproducing? It's the ladies.
I mean,
and so it sucks that that's it's just us.
Yeah.
It's our job.
Well, no, but I don't know.
But
I would think of it differently, personally. Yeah,
right.
yeah,
But
yeah.
I mean, well, I obviously think of it differently because I am not doing that. But, so it just sucks that that's just, you know, when it comes down to, you know, if your role is to create a population of people that have a certain thing, well who's doing that?
Yeah, and I we've pointed this out in like other readings, but I'd point out again here that like, obviously, I think the way that we do things and the way that I think is the right way to do things. And I don't have any evidence for that. And like, you know, it is weird to me to be like, well, what if the women of the Furman culture said, this is the way things are and this is the way we want it to be? What if they said that? Do I believe them? Because if they don't know anything else, and we have that problem here on Earth as well, right?
Right.
You know, there are plenty of people in more conservative cultures that would say, I want this, but I don't know. And then I don't know if I get to decide. And then, I mean, I guess kind of my position boils down to, unless you're doing something that I see as wrong and like wrong enough, I'm not going to get involved, right? And once you go to the point of like killing people, here I come. But,
well, and so I think for the Bene Gesserit's point of view, they're using that as a form of control, right? Yeah. Like, because they have the power to reproduce, they have the power to control the bloodline. And so I feel like they're trying to angle it positively in that way. Yeah. You know, that this is an ability that they have. And they're the only ones who can streamline this bloodline to what they want it to be.
Yeah. Peggy points out that it was the Count's wife. I get confused between all the titles. And the problem also is that the titles, they have, so it's Baron Harkonnen, Duke Atreides, and then you have this Count. Technically, all those things mean different things. Mm-hmm. But, and like a Count is definitely below both a Duke and a Baron. But I can't remember exactly how a Baron and anyway, the way he uses titles in this book confuses me because it doesn't quite mean what we would use.
Right, because they're all playing in the same level of arena. But yeah, the Baron liked the Count's wife's neck because it looked like a young boy's.
Yeah.
Ooh.
It's definitely in there to make us not like him.
Baron, there's something wrong with this.
He's just like a creepy, like he reminds me of Jabba the Hutt, right? Like that's pretty much what he is supposed to be.
Excuse me.
He's this like slug man thing who's just like floating around, eyeballing people, and then of course he keeps comparing his nephew and heir, and be like, oh, he's beautiful too. I'm like, oh, crazy. Lord.
Yeah, they're interesting. The Count and his wife, the mumblers.
Yeah.
They're interesting.
I think the Harkonnens are really interesting. I don't think they're good. We said that last week, but like I want to spend some time there. I want to find out about their culture, you know.
I don't.
Nasty. You know, so and one other thing is they talk several times about Seleucus Secundus as a prison planet.
Oh yeah.
And in the movies, they treat Seleucus Secundus as the imperial homeworld, and that may be true. I don't necessarily know that there's a difference, but like that's kind of interesting to me, like just a prison planet because that's expensive, right? Like that's,
right.
Moving people to one place is
well,
expensive.
And doesn't Baron Harkonnen want to turn Arrakis into a prison planet?
Well, he basically just like kind of get rid of the Fremen, replace their labor with prison labor.
Fremen, that place is loaded up with Fremen.
Yeah, it was interesting.
Was the audio? Peggy asks, was the audiobook of these people speaking as difficult to get through as the book? The audiobook is lovely.
It's really good.
It's fabulous. Yeah. Sometimes you have different actors reading their own dialogue, and then sometimes it goes back to the narrator. But I've noticed they use the different actors whenever there's quick dialogue back and forth. And it breaks it up really nicely. There's like music and production value to the audiobook. I mean, it's like really great.
Yeah. I'm not sure. I'd be interested in knowing the process and how they decided at what point to use the actors and what point to use the narrator. But I have never had a problem yet. And sometimes I wouldn't even notice that it switched.
I don't either.
You know the Baron's voice, like you know all the voices eventually. And then when it goes back to the narrator, that's just kind of the way an audiobook works anyway.
Yeah.
So,
I love it. It's been great. And so I switch back and forth as well. I read the actual book, and I don't have any problem switching back and forth between them. I don't know. I don't. I keep trying to figure out. I keep trying to figure out like why do I enjoy this book so much? Because it doesn't really seem like I should.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's too many people and the setting is too vast, and I honestly don't understand what's going on half the time. But there's something that I really really do love about it, and I think the way that the author has just set this up, like we had this whole book too, and it was all like one day.
Yeah,
One
conversations in
one
the
day
desert.
out in the desert,
Mm-hmm.
and Jessica's now a reverend mother, and Wee Duke is now a killer and a husband,
Not really.
a slave owner,
That
parent. He's got two kids
True.
now. Like the Fremen, stinky home that we've come to love within about 5 minutes. We're about to leave. Like it's all happened so fast. Oh yeah, there was the weird little gladiator scene where like,
Yeah.
okay, we need to back up and
finish your
talk
thought.
about that.
We'll go there.
But anyways, this was only just like one day, but
Yeah.
so much happened. So
Yeah.
the storytelling that what's his name? Aber?
Yeah, Frank Herbert.
Frank Herbert.
Not Frank Herbert. Different.
The storytelling methods that he uses really draws me in, and I don't want to stop reading until I've hit the end of the book.
Yeah. I have been thinking a lot lately about writing and like how people write, and I have been trying to. I listened to a interview recently with Neil Gaiman where he talked about how whenever when other authors were reading stories, they were seeing it through the eyes of a writer and not through the eyes of a reader, and he realized that he was reading stories through the eyes of a reader. So he started reading them through the eyes of a writer to improve his writing. And so I've just been kind of thinking about that, and I've been like looking at the dialogue I find like particularly difficult to write.
Yeah, because it's real corny.
And this is only dialogue, basically, right? Like that's it. And there's really something to the way that this guy writes that it's able to draw you in. It's not like so formal, but it has a formality that is interesting, right? Sometimes when people write, it's just like it's stiff, right?
Yeah.
And his characters have that stiffness because it is their job to have it, But he's able to play with it and do things.
Speaking of stiffness, why is Chani so formal sounding when she talks?
I don't really think I felt that way.
Yeah. Her speech pattern is much different than what's his name? The main Fremen in the group.
Stilgar.
Yeah. Way different. And I figured she would talk just like he does. They're all in one thing. Okay, so question. Who is the Princess Irulan?
It is the daughter of the current emperor.
Why does she know so much about Muad'dib?
I don't know. I think we will ultimately, if we find out, it'll be in another book, right? I mean, if this jihad is going to go down, then obviously he's going to have to fight against the emperor, so on and so forth. But I mean, it's just a storytelling mechanism, right? It's somebody who is writing a history at a future point. She has no idea he even exists, probably like right now.
Right. Okay.
She's off doing whatever she's doing, and at some point in the future, she will write this history.
So up until we met Chani and learned that she was Kynes' daughter, I thought the Princess Irulan was Chani.
Oh, gotcha.
I thought she was, and I was like, oh wait, this doesn't seem right because she's saying her dad's the emperor.
Yeah. She just makes reference to like in my father's court and things like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You go.
Peggy says, big question. Why the chapter on Kynes? A whole chapter of this poor man dying in the desert. I felt that chapter was cruel. That was a weird chapter because I really thought like, oh, he's going to make it. And then he didn't. And so because of that, I liked it. Because the character I was following died. And I enjoy when that happens.
Yeah, that commitment to killing off a character.
Yeah, it takes some guts to be an author to kill somebody off. Especially after you've spent that long doing it. But if the question is why, and I'm not sure this is why, but I think it's because he, in that weird hallucination with his father, is getting into how it was like his dream to turn Arrakis into a paradise, and how it is scientifically possible, and it's not just these like desert bumpkins who are saving water, hoping that by saving water it will become a nice place, right? Could you have done it some other way? Sure. There needed to be some kind of closure to like where is Kynes, I suppose. Especially Especially because later on in the book we have this Bene Gesserit quote that's like, people aren't dead until you see the body, and even then, not quite.
Yeah.
And so, like, maybe that might be like a Frank Herbert idea, you know? So maybe he's like, you have to see kinds die. I'm going to say this too, and this, I'm not going to spoil anything, but because I happen to know a little bit more about this story just from being around it, like, in my life, that quote holds a lot more true than I would think. And I think that's why that is important.
Yeah.
So there's some breadcrumbs here, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, when she spoke that quote, I was like, okay. So, like, there's some people that we think are dead that aren't going to be dead.
Yeah. And I wanted to be clear about this. I'm not necessarily referring to kinds.
Right.
Like, I don't know.
So, speaking of other people who may or may not be dead, oh, I just forgot who I was going to ask about. Shucks. Oh, yeah. Okay, so the gladiator scene.
Yeah.
What's up with Howitt?
I mean, he's trying to survive, right? So he signs up with the Baron Harkonnen, and then decides he's going to backstab him by trying to kill off his heir, right? But in a way that he could have plausible deniability.
But then the nephew...
The nephew knows he did it, but he can't prove it.
Wait, knows he did what?
That he didn't drug the slave, and that he prepped him.
Well, I thought Howitt was the slave.
No.
Where's Howitt?
He was never at all in that scene.
I'm confused.
Okay, so Howitt is captured, right, on Arrakis. He signs up to work with the Baron, probably to get revenge, right, for Duke Atreides. There is some other dude that is captured on Arrakis, just some unnamed soldier.
Atreides?
And yes,
soldier?
and that is the guy who's fighting in the arena. And Howitt hooks him up, but in a way that they can blame it on the slave master, so the slave master gets killed. And everybody knows this is going on, but, like, it's the game they play. And they don't, and especially, and that's part of why the Count is in this scene, because he says to the Baron, like, if you kill Howitt, we will know there's too many accidents, so you can't do that, right? So he gives Howitt a little bit of plot armor for, like, how he could try to make this assassination and keep going.
I still don't understand.
Okay.
That's okay. Peggy says, let's unpack the gladiator thing.
Yeah.
No drugs was the plan. They're blaming the slave master. The surprise was that the man was Leto's guy.
Right. So Howitt, he's supposed to, yeah, that's right. There was not supposed to be any drugs involved because it's supposed to be like a more real fight than normal. And then they were going to kill off the slave master anyway. Like, the slave master was just going to die because they wanted to have this, like, ooh, Phaedra Alpha beat somebody that was, like, stronger than normal, and then they were going to have this, like, intrigue thing, and it was supposed to make him a little more popular. But Howitt goes and gets an Atreides guy and makes that the person who's going to fight, because he will fight harder because he hates the Harkonnens. And then the slave master dies.
Who was the slave master?
We don't know. It doesn't matter. He's just there so Howitt doesn't die.
I don't understand.
Okay.
It's okay. I don't get that whole part. But what I did get was how focused Jessica is this entire time on, like, all the details of how everything that's happening is still very suitable for her son as future Duke. Like, their life is just in danger, and she's like, oh, but this is a great setup for my son, the Duke.
Right.
You know,
like, he needs to learn the value of money, and water is money.
Yeah, I mean, like,
yeah.
she has, like, half of herself that's panicking because they're on the brink of death at all times. And then this other half of her that's very focused on, let's make sure that we're setting him up for success, and that he's understanding what's going on, and he's still going to be a good leader. I mean, how admirable is that?
I don't know that I'd say it's admirable. It's part of her training, right? Like, she cannot help but think about the politics.
Yeah.
Like, it's all she does, you know?
Yeah.
And so, in everything, she finds the way to... The Bene Gesserit are the puppet masters, right? And
I love it.
Here she is being the puppet master.
It is
it's
so
kind of cool.
You know, as far as, like, other books in this series, I do think I would like to read the ones focused on the Bene Gesserit. They are so interesting. And there's this phrase in the book that keeps coming up over again: plans within plans within plans. Mm-hmm. You know, we talked about this last episode where, you know, the Bene Gesserit seed has been planted on this planet. Yeah. There's also the seeds of the Fremen literally being planted on this
Yeah.
planet, but you have these plans within plans within plans.
Yeah.
The Bene Gesserit seed was planted. Jessica and Paul are figuring out ways to fit into the seeds of that Bene Gesserit situation.
Yeah.
And it's all working.
Yeah.
And there's also other things going on, very mystical, outside of their control, feeding into the Bene Gesserit plan.
Yeah.
And so it's fun as the reader because we're like, okay, these are the things that were planted. These are the things that we didn't see coming, but it's still working. So there's this idea that, like, it's the religion and there's a prophecy and it's baked in.
Yeah.
But, like, it's also happening for real.
Yeah. I think about I'm super fascinated by the Missionaria Protectiva or whatever, and you know, like, you could make a school of people, and it was just like, if you land on a planet and things are going south, you say this thing, and like, we will have been to all the planets, and we will have planted this religion, right? And so you just say, like, I come from the sky god, and they'll be like, what? And then if they do that, then you show them this thing, and that is their mystical symbol, and they're like, what? And then you'll get all the help you need, right? But it's like it's a weird, like, safety valve. So then, in a past life, I was like semi-famous for a little while for writing about like weird religions that come out of crisis. I wrote like a whole paper on it, and I don't know, whatever, people knew about it. But there are these interesting things. They're called crisis cults, and they are religions that come out of trauma. And so, like, for example, the ghost dance religion in Native American history is like a crisis cult. It is a religion that did not exist until the West and the buffalo and all the disease and all that stuff started happening, and then this religion comes up as it tries to be an answer to that. And so I've really been thinking about that a lot in terms of the Fremen and their religion, right? Like, you plant this thing, but then how does that mutate in reference to, like, also the culture that planted it here, you know? And then there's another thing that's called cargo cults. I don't know if we've ever talked about this before. It's really interesting. But so, like, there would be, in like the 14 and 1500s, there would be native tribes on like islands in the Caribbean that would see like Columbus and people pull up on their boats, and they would have all the food and all the cool stuff, right? And so they would build boats that didn't work, but like mock boats, hoping that it would get the gods to come back, because all they knew is that like these things brought the goods. And that happened again in the Pacific during World War II. We would go and build bases on these like random islands that had native people on them who had never seen a plane. And they would build fake dirt runways, and they would build fake wooden planes, trying to get planes to land in like a religious sense. Like, this is what brings, you know, everything. And so I've been thinking about that in terms of like how easy it would kind of be to build that sort of religion into a culture, right? And then the sky people will come and they will have the weirding way and blah, 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 whatever, right? Like, it's almost a cargo cult. Like, you could build the technologies in as a form of like divine intervention. That was long. Thank you.
Man, that's crazy. Gosh, we're so willing to believe in something, you know, like we just, and it's all based on survival, right? I mean,
right. Well, so then, like, if you want to go like really far into it, there are people who think that most of the world's major religions are really cargo cults that are related to aliens. I'm not one of those people, right? But like, what if the idea of praying is trying to replicate this like telepathic communication that these other things have, right? What if, you know, there's all these different things that we do that we're like, wow, how crazy, but like, it could be. Yeah. It could, you know.
Yeah, for sure. I super loved the scene where Jessica drank the water and manipulated the little atoms within her to become the Reverend Mother. It was such a detailed scene. Like, I'm going to move this little atom over here to this side, and this little atom's going to protect the baby Jessica, and this little atom's going to come over here and become the Reverend Mother.
Yep.
How cool is that? And what a weird place to spend time writing, but like it was so cool. And like how time froze, and she's like, wait a minute, time froze. Wait, why did time freeze? Oh, so I have time to move me wee atoms.
Yeah. I think that's an important part of storytelling, though, right? Like, there's definitely the info dump where I now know too much about everything in your world, and there's an art to saying like, "Hey, this thing exists," and you're like, "Well, wait, I want to know more about it," and you never hear about it again. But now you just know that there's like a council of sieges out there, which there wasn't, but like it's referenced and you move on. Right?
Yeah.
And then then you're like, oh, but we're gonna focus on the part where they can fix their atoms up. You know.
Yeah.
Picking and choosing, it makes it believable because now you know a lot about this like one weird thing. But the world is not believable when you know too much about everything.
Right.
Because that's not how our world
right.
works.
Well, yeah, we don't understand how everything works. So, speaking of which, I was getting caught up on our Goodreads community today, and Greg Fox had posted how interesting it was that we were like, wow, the Bene Gesserits are really like the Jedi Order. The Jedi were inspired by
No, I'm sure.
the Bene Gesserits.
Yeah,
It all makes sense.
Yeah.
But, I mean, it was just such a cool scene. And I said it 2 minutes ago, and I'm saying it again. I think I'm invested in reading the part of the series about the Bene Gesserit. They're just so fascinating to me.
Yeah. You know, I don't know if there's any like good like Star Wars books out there, but I've thought that might be kind of cool.
I have the Phantom Menace novel.
Well, I mean, I don't need that. I mean, but they have all these like spin-offs.
It is not good because it's just the exact same thing. It was like written after the movie came out. Like it's just all the same thing. Okay, so to get caught up on the chat, Peggy says, "How is this young loser awesome when he kills drugged people?" I'd have to moderate what I'm thinking about this situation. Not a hero.
Clearly not a hero.
Right.
And I think obviously part of the reason that they're drugged is so that we don't like him, right? He's not a good character. He reminds me a lot of Commodus from Gladiator. That's exactly what this scene is, basically. And you know, he's supposed to be gross, but like, how is he likable? He's likable in that he's not as gross as the other ones, and that's kind of what we've been being pitched throughout this book. Is like someday it'll be Feyd-Rautha, and he's not as bad as we are, and that's true, but he's bad. So.
And then Peggy also says, not admirable, a little snobby. If she only knew that he's with Chani in the future. Scandal. Are you talking about Jessica there? Yeah. And I love the whole time Jessica's like, ooh, I haven't warned him yet about the ladies of this place. I need to let him know. Too late.
I want to hop back real quick to the Gladiator comment real quick. But one other point is just to make sure everybody knows, he, you know, the Baron has put his like cousin or something in charge of Arrakis now. And the whole point of that guy being in charge of Arrakis is that he is so terrible to them that this guy can go and then be a hero.
Right.
Okay. Yeah.
I did understand that part. I just still don't understand the whole gladiator part. But I also just might not understand the concept of gladiator stuff. So that's fine. That's my problem. And Peggy says that was a cool scene and how neat a way to learn history, you know, on drugs. Cinnamon trip.
Yeah. That's fine.
It is fascinating to see Paul's progression of how he understands his, what does he call it? His, yes, yeah. And how he's understanding that, you know, he's seeing these pathways, and he did notice, like, he's like, oh, I did something that wasn't part of my vision. So he's able to see that he has agency. Yeah. He can make decisions, and these decisions might not have been things that he can see on a cinnamon trips. Yeah.
Well, I think part of that scene, too, and it might have been a different one, but part of that scene was that he realized that even though he had changed and he didn't want to, and he did something that wasn't in his visions, and he doesn't want to, like, be a killer, and he doesn't want this jihad thing, it actually has less to do with his actions and more to do with his mother's and his future sisters. Mm-hmm. And so that is kind of an interesting play on, well, could I change the future? Is you can change your actions, but the future is inevitable, because there is so much more going on than just yourself. Right. And that is kind of a cool concept.
Well, and you know, he had that thought for a moment that his mother's the enemy. Yeah. And then it never came back to that. Mm-hmm. But that was just something that like flashed through his mind. And that's, I mean, she's a force to be reckoned with for sure. Yeah. And she already kind of breaks the rules, right? The fact that she had Paul to begin with. She's all about messing up the plans within plans within plans. Yeah. So... Let's see. Allison says, I may not like a particular book, but I love your enthusiasm of your interpretations.
That's why we're here, to be enthusiastic.
And Peggy says it's a play on fate, I think. Can we change destiny? Are we in charge of our fates?
Yeah.
And you bring up a really great point about that. You know, fate is fate, and the future is the future. We get so caught up in, well, does that mean that I have no control over what I do? Sure, you've got plenty of control over what you do. But the future is so much more than one person. How often is it that one person is so integral to, you know, the destiny of others?
Yeah.
Not often.
I might be getting this wrong. But in history, there's a theory called like the great man idea, right? And the idea is that like Napoleon was a great man, and the things that Napoleon did could never have happened without Napoleon. And I want to say the other one is like a historical dialectic or something. I feel like it has to do with Kant, but it doesn't matter. Like the idea is that anybody could have been that person. Mm-hmm. It's that the forces of history bring us to this point, and there was going to be a Napoleon, didn't matter who, mm-hmm. and that the same things essentially would have happened. Obviously not fate, and obviously not like absolutely going to happen.
But like these things had to happen, and it was either Fred or Napoleon, and Napoleon's the one that did it.
And so, but like, and nobody knows what the correct answer is, right? Mm-hmm. Like and it's obviously a little bit of both, right? Because great men are a part of the history, right? Like I don't see why those two things have to fight each other. But that's kind of like what we see here, right? We have Paul, who is the great man, and is this all going to happen because of Paul? And the answer is probably no. Somebody was going to be the male Bene Gesserit thing, right? It was going to happen eventually. Whether or not they were going to end up on Arrakis, I don't know. That's an interesting coincidence, right? Because the reasons for going to Arrakis are totally separate from his birth, you know. Mm-hmm. So,
except it's all Jessica.
Yeah. Well, but she didn't organize for the Harkonnens to have to leave so that the Atreides could go, right? Like that's a
the Bennies might have though,
but they might have. That is true.
And so I mean, it's just plans within plans within plans.
That is true.
Oh, so interesting. So interesting. Let's see. That is all of my notes. I'm gonna take a look at last week's to see if there's any questions that we had unanswered. Cuisinart Snack Attack. Now Lady Fennering is going to try.
Yeah.
Yeah, for real. What's up with that kid, huh?
Yeah.
Who's that going to be in the future of things?
That is interesting. I mean, like the fact that it's just been that it is in there, kind of like it's like somebody's gonna. He might be somebody in the future.
Maybe that'll kid is the real Cuisinart Snack Attack.
Yeah.
Oh man. Snack Attack, speaking of which.
Hungry.
I could use a snack. Princess Irulan.
Yeah.
Man.
I think more than anything, what I like about this book is that it does give us things to talk about. I got to talk about cargo cults today. Like, have you heard anybody talk about cargo cults this week? No, you haven't. So that was cool.
Oh, I thought it was neat. You know, so part of the... Paul. I was like, Timmy C. That's not who it is. Part of Paul's future vision, you know, is that he would be called the Muad'dib. And so when they were like, okay, well, you got to choose your name, he's like, what's the little desert mouse called? It does like this.
Yeah.
Muad'dib. What?
I did like, I hadn't quite processed that Muad'dib is not the same as, what is the other thing he is? The Cuisinart Snack Attack, right?
I know, I thought they were the same.
I hadn't quite processed that they were not the same thing. And then whenever it was like, oh, that just means like weird desert mouse, I was like, oh, but that was cool. He has too many names now. He is Cuisinart Snack Attack, Muad'dib, Paul, Otto, or something.
Yeah, they keep calling him Little Something.
Yeah, too many names.
Yeah. But I mean, that's a hero right there, right?
Yeah. I mean, but then I think about and lots of people have too many names, right? Everybody's got nicknames and...
Yeah. Peggy in the chat says it's the same argument of who's supposed to defeat Voldemort. And I was going to bring that up too, but I was like, I don't know that everyone wants another Harry Potter reference. But the chosen one could have been Harry or Neville. They were both born at the end of July. Yep. They both had parents who were, you know, brought down by the Dark Lord. And
it's because Voldemort chose Harry, basically, that it becomes Harry,
mm-hmm.
right? Like, isn't that the deal? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's who he focused on. So, yeah, could have been either of them. That's all I got.
Yeah. I don't like fate as like a hard concept unless we're doing time travel. Like if there's a knot that cannot be undone, then I'm in for it for fate, and then I want you to find a creative way for me to get out. But if it's just like these, but if it's about prophecy, I need room to play, and I think we have that here, so that's cool.
Well, and prophecy is just such an interesting, like, motif, storyline wise, because people's motivations and inner desires and what they're willing to see and not see, all of that plays into it, and you get so much more out of it.
Yeah. You know what's really interesting is there's a lot of like sci-fi and fiction or fantasy that have cultures where prophecy is taboo, or like the concept of trying to predict the future is like you're getting into the territory of the gods, and like you don't have that here, I guess. But also this, for all the religion that we have, I have met no gods. I don't know anything about the gods at all. I know that there are multiple. There are several references, I think, by the Atreides that there are several gods. And then there was the whole thing where like they weren't sure if Leto, or not Leto, whatever, the Fremen, they couldn't tell if it was a god or a man, but it was Kynes, so that's who it was. So, who was kind of a deity in his own right to them, but because he's the one who gave them the vision of a green Arrakis.
Yeah. Poor Johnny.
You know, that's something they left out in the first movie is you don't have the relationship between Chani and Kynes, but also Kynes is a woman. And so, but you could have still done that. So,
well, the movies clearly are not broken up into like book 1, book 2, book 3.
It's really close.
Very
though.
cleanly.
I think it's close. No, you're right. You're right because we had the fight with Jameis in the first movie.
But
you're
then
right.
so there's some things that are kind of left out, and I don't know.
You're right.
Yeah. That's interesting.
Cool.
I'm looking forward to the movie, though. I did see a little clickbaity headline that says that it might get pushed back to 2024. They've already released the trailer, so the production's done, yeah.
I think some of it has to do with the
strike.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you gotta treat people well and pay people
part
for the work
of
they do.
the problem with that is that the actors, because they're on strike, aren't promoting movies, and so people aren't like finding out that movies exist. But after we do it, we'll do except for those we have, and we'll analyze the movie.
Yeah, we probably should do
the first one.
Yeah.
Sure.
We were watching it the other day, and I paused it though because I didn't want to go too far in the movie, further in the movie than in the book. Because like now I'm really paying attention. Now I know what's going on.
Yeah.
I'm not just staring at the pretty people on the screen. Oh, speaking of pretty people on the screen. Okay, so is Jason Momoa dead?
Do you want the real answer or the book answer? It's complicated.
In the book? These are the bones of the dead people that we haven't seen?
Well, so I hadn't thought of that, but he is one of them. There are many people that I would say are returning characters. He is, I think we are led to believe that he is dead at this point.
Well, because it's just, what's his name? Timmy C just keeps saying, golly, Paul just keeps saying, my friend who I assume is dead now.
Yeah. So you'll remember in the movie they're in like they're in the Imperial place, and then that's the last you see of them. More complicated, but yes.
Yeah. And that didn't quite happen all like that in the book. We didn't.
It was close.
We didn't see him again, though, did we?
No, I think he was there for that scene.
Oh, okay.
I'm not sure though. And Peggy says Gurney Halleck. I'm not. I think he's dead, but I'm not certain about it.
Yeah. And that was Sir Patrick Stewart, right? Gurney Halleck was Sir Pat Stewart.
Yeah,
the original.
and in the new one, he is Pierce Brosnan, I think.
Oh wow! Okay.
In it.
Gosh, is it?
I might be making that.
Oh my God, we gotta start the movie over. I don't know.
Is that wrong? No, it's not. It's not him. Hang on.
007 over
here?
Yeah. Dang. See how it's just beautiful people in these movies. It's just wild. Crazy. Man. So, if y'all have anything else left to say in the chat, please throw it in the chat. Just a reminder to any
Josh Brolin. My bad. Josh Brolin.
There you go.
Yeah. Not right. Josh Brolin.
Still a beautiful person.
Yeah.
Our Books We Never Read main episodes are also part of the Books We Never Read podcast on YouTube Music or YouTube Podcasts. So that's just another avenue to be able to listen if you don't want to watch. And just a fun fact, this week in literary history, tomorrow is the day that Harry Potter receives his first Hogwarts letter. technically didn't receive it. The first Hogwarts letter was sent to Harry's house.
Oh.
Uncle Vernon and Aunt Petunia destroyed it. And then subsequently, lots of letters
Gotcha.
came through. But yeah.
Also, please continue giving us books. We have chosen our next book, and we'll put out a short, I guess, about what that will be. It's a little difficult to put out whole 5-minute videos for what our next book is, because we don't have that much to say. We'll have more to say whenever we do the syllabus episode. So be watching for that short where we announce our book, because we will start that one next Sunday.
Big change pace.
Yep. And we only have 1 week to read this next bit of this book, but it's pretty short.
Is it short?
My thing says it's only 3 hours until I get there.
Because boy howdy, I'm glad we ended up accidentally spending 2 weeks for each of these first parts, because I was finishing just in the nick of time.
Yeah.
I mean, I've loved it. I've enjoyed it, but it has been a lot of reading.
Yeah.
So,
as always, we appreciate everybody who comes and hangs out live. It's a lot of fun. I don't think I would have had nearly as much to say if Peggy hadn't been commenting as well. She reminded me of several things that I had thought of that I didn't write down.
I'm sorry that you're not enjoying it, Peggy, but to read your comments, it sounds like you are, so.
It can be both.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, I guess like the Flanders panel. Like, we didn't like it, but we had so much to talk about.
I don't mind if people don't enjoy the book. I want them to enjoy
the conversation and the hangout and the book club as a whole. Yeah. So I am looking forward to our next book, and we'll post that shortly.
Yep. And we are rapidly coming up on our year anniversary. I'm going to keep saying it.
Oh, yeah.
But here we come. And maybe we do like a tier list or something. So.
Oh yeah, we do need to. Maybe we should
and let's do
set up like a people's vote. Like y'all can vote on like your top 3. We'll vote on our top 3, or top whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, we need to have a year in review.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, let's wrap it up because we're hitting an hour.
All right.
So, thank y'all very much. We will see you next week.
See ya. Happy reading.